All right. Okay, welcome everyone to the No Evictions teach-in. We will continue the teach-in or start the teach-in in just a moment. We're just giving everyone a moment to get settled in and to share the event or the live stream with our various members of No Rent Michigan. If you're joining us, please share this video so that more renters in Michigan can learn how to defend themselves from evictions. If you're just joining us, we're going to start in just a moment with the teach-in. We're just giving everyone a moment to settle in and sharing out this video. Please do share the video so more renters in Michigan know what to do if they're facing eviction. Okay. All right, welcome everyone. All right. So welcome, welcome. I'm Amy Carpenter. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm part of the statewide coalition that is No Rent Michigan. No Rent Michigan works with tenant groups and organizers all over the state, including Detroit, Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Lansing, Kalamazoo, Traverse City, and Grand Rapids. I'm in Grand Rapids on the west side of Michigan. I'm an ally and a volunteer organizer in the newly formed Grand Rapids Area Tenants Union. And I also work with our local mutual aid network, and Together We Are Safe, which is a citywide group regarding our local housing crisis. I'll be the facilitator of the teach-in tonight. Thank you for joining us. We have folks here who have organized as tenants and have a wealth of experience and knowledge that they're willing to share with all of you. So for those of you watching this Facebook Live right now, as you may know, the governor recently extended the eviction moratorium here in Michigan until June 11th. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. This means that renters cannot be evicted due to non-payment of rent, and that no late fees can be charged during that time. It also means that courts can delay eviction-related proceedings. Yet we know that tenants need to be ready when the moratorium lifts on June 11th. So tonight, our No Evictions teach-in has 4 parts. Here's the agenda. Part 1 of the teach-in, if you're not at the eviction stage yet, but you are struggling to pay your rent, how do you organize and what do you tell your landlord? Part 2, what are some strategies and resources you can use? How do you know if an eviction is actually illegal? Part 3, what do you need to know about your legal rights as a tenant? And Part 4, what experiences have other folks had in fighting eviction? At the end of the call, we will be answering questions for a short Q&A. So write your questions in the comments as we go along, and we'll answer them at the end. We also have resources in the document in the video caption, including links to a tenants union near you. Also, if you can share this video, it means more renters will know how to fight evictions and how to start connecting with each other so they can organize. Okay, with that, we will start. If you are not at the eviction stage yet, but you are struggling to pay your rent, how do you organize and what do you tell your landlord? Katrina and Em are from Wilson White Tenants Coalition in the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti area, and they will talk tonight about what they've done. Please introduce yourselves more fully and tell us about organizing.
Hi, thank you. I'm Em.
I am Katrina.
We're from the Wilson White Tenants Coalition in Ypsi and Ann Arbor, and we just wanted to share with you how we got organized and how you can begin to get organized as well if you haven't already, so that you can prepare for things like evictions before they come up and hopefully avoid them.
I'm gonna share my screen now just so that everybody can see our graphics and follow along.
So when you the reasons to kind of start organizing, I mean, the main one is just you're not alone and neither are any of your neighbors, and any sorts of thoughts or concerns that you have, other people have them too. So when you reach out to your neighbors, they're very likely going to be grateful that you've reached out. And the first step really is to just get into contact with them. Some reasons it's helpful to get into contact with them include building connections to help out one another, checking in with each other, seeing if anyone's struggling to pay rent and getting them in contact with any sort of resources that are available to them, if the landlord or company is not already assisting with that. And also just sharing stories with each other about what the landlord has or hasn't offered to individual tenants, because you will probably find that you'll probably find out about things you didn't know were happening just by talking with other people. And that will build you a lot of power. And then as you start getting connected with each other, you can start strategizing to make requests of your landlords as you discuss what your various needs are. So the first step to getting in contact, obviously we have to be very careful about how we do this right now because we can't be face to face with each other. So organizing looks a lot different during this time. The first step really is to just write a letter, and if you're in a building with multiple units, to post that letter to the doors in your building. That was the first thing that I did, and I made sure to include my contact information at the bottom of that letter. And the letter was just really basic outreach to folks to see if they needed any support and to let them know that, you know, we're stronger together and we can build a connection during this time. From then you can outreach to any other buildings that your landlord owns. So if you're in a complex, you can start making flyers and posting those on the doors of your complex. And you can take to social media and find local groups where you can kind of just post, does anybody have my landlord? Does anybody live in these buildings? And get into contact with people that way. And once you get into contact with people that way, then those folks can help with writing letters to their neighbors and flyering to their neighbors, and it really builds out from there. If you've done all these things and you're still not getting into contact with neighbors for whatever reason, maybe landlords start noticing your flyers and taking them down, the next and probably final outreach step would be to directly mail any of your fellow neighbors. So what our coalition did was create postcards, and we found all of the addresses that our company manages, and we just got those postcards sent out to everybody. So that's a very direct form of outreach. And I would just suggest that maybe you create an email for your group, especially as you grow, so that before you contact your landlord with any sort of letter of demands, they contact that email rather than targeting a specific person. Once you have gotten into contact with everybody, you're going to want to start some sort of a group forum so that you can all discuss with each other. So some options for a group space to have a conversation include creating a private Facebook group, creating a group me, creating a Slack, creating a WhatsApp group or getting everyone together on the Signal app, which is an encrypted option if that's something that you're interested in. And that from there you can start having discussions, sharing your stories, sharing your frustrations, and coming up with your list of needs. And after you've gotten into a discussion space, you can establish a regularly occurring meeting time where you can talk face to face. Some options for doing this include Zoom, Google Hangouts, and Jitsi if, again, you want a safe encrypted way to do that. So once you are in these spaces talking to your neighbors and you've gotten everybody, like you've assessed everyone's needs and you've gotten people connected with resources if it's possible, you are probably going to want to start talking about your strategies for how you're going to get your needs met. So this is when you can create a collective letter and collectively create some requests or demands for your landlord based on what your needs are. And that will look different for every landlord group. It can include a reduction of rent. It can include a waive of late fees. It can include eviction protection, and it can include any maintenance related issues. And then you'll get signatures collected for the letter and decide as a group what makes the most sense for your group to do.
Once you have filled out your demands letter and you have already sent it to the landlord, you can do some things to make sure that your demands are heard. One of the things that you can do is you can host a phones app, which is when you fill up the phone lines of your leasing company or landlord by having people routinely call and read off the demands. So that's a good way to make sure that the landlords are hearing your demands. Another thing you can do is you can negatively review the company on Google or any other reviewing website to say, hey, my landlord hasn't met with me. We've tried to meet these demands. They are not caring about their tenants during a pandemic, and that's very stressful. And that's a good way to get a little bit more traction and coverage. Additionally, you can also rent strike. We really suggest if you do rent strike that you try to have the majority of units participating in it so that you have more protections and also that the rent strike is more successful. And as we had mentioned before, connecting to local other orgs is really important so that you can have your platform shown to broader groups of people and to also have more people stand in solidarity with you. So you're a little bit of a bigger group. And we just want to reiterate, if you can't pay rent, you're really not alone. A lot of people are experiencing that, and there are a lot of housing justice groups all over the state and community organizations that are ready to fight with you. I just listed out some of these local housing justice groups that you can reach out to. If your city is not on there, totally feel free to reach out to No Rent Michigan. We can try to connect you to the right people. All of this information will be shared through a PDF document afterwards if you're interested in having any of these contact information. But it's just very important for you to remember that there are a lot of people that are standing in solidarity with you, wanting to organize with you. So you should definitely reach out. And also contacting other local groups on Facebook is a good way to connect with your neighbors, as we had mentioned before. So if you are before the eviction state, this is a good place to start.
Great. Thank you so much, Katrina and Em. So appreciate that. Yes, and as Katrina mentioned, it's actually in the video caption to this video is a link to the PDF. So all those slides that you saw, all the emails that you just saw listed, that's all available for you right along with this video that's live streaming right now. And if you have questions about what you've heard here, you can write them in the comments of this live stream. We'll have Q&A at the end. So we can talk about that. If you know there's no tenants union near you or no group near you, you can always contact No Rent Michigan on Facebook for support. And if you haven't shared this video yet, go ahead and do it. There are a lot of renters in Michigan who don't know what Katrina and Em just shared, who don't know some of the things that are coming up, including about illegal evictions. So share widely so we can really get the word out. Okay. Thanks again, Katrina and M. Second part, what are some strategies and resources that you can use? How do you know if an eviction is actually illegal, if your landlord is not actually following the law in what they're pursuing against you? Some organizers from Detroit Renter City will be talking about that tonight, Rachel and Tristan. Please introduce yourselves more fully and teach us about some strategies.
Hey, hi everyone, my name is Rachel Baker and I'm one of the organizers and founders of Detroit Renter City. And in just a moment, after I run through this first part, you'll meet one of our other organizers. So Detroit Renter City is a relatively new organization in Detroit, Michigan. We formed in the fall of 2019. So Detroit Renter City is a small group of concerned housing activists who use their knowledge and their skills to ensure that renters across the city of Detroit understand the rights that they have to resist displacement and exploitation. We are researchers and organizers and rabble-rousers who understand that housing is a right and that renters are not disposable. And because we are in Detroit and we are a Detroit-focused group who happen to also benefit from all of the knowledge of our statewide collaborators, we also are very front and center about how important the prevention of racial dispossession is in Detroit. We want to make sure that Black folks stay in their neighborhoods and stay housed and stay safe and healthy in the particular context that we're in today. So Detroit Renter City can be found online. We have a website if you want to follow along with what Tristan and I have to say tonight. Our website can be found at www.detroitrentercity.com. So the first thing that Tristan is going to go over, I'm just going to share out my page with everyone momentarily so you can see all of the different resources that we have to share with you online. So DetroitRenterCity.com has a great taskbar that has all kinds of resources in it. And the first thing we are going to hear about tonight from Tristan is actually also available in a flyer. And this flyer, as Amy mentioned, is something that's available in the PDF that will be shared out to the group. So Tristan, I will hand it off to you.
Thanks, Rachel. So yeah, my name is Tristan Taylor. I'm a lifelong Detroiter who has the experience of being a lifelong renter in the city. And I'll just start off by saying I can't think of an eviction that I had that was actually legal. Unfortunately, landlords too often use intimidation tactics to actually get people to self-evict themselves. And because people know so little about their actual rights and powers as renters, unfortunately, landlords oftentimes prove effective. And so the thing that we really want to hone in on is the fact that as renters, we actually have rights and we also have power. And that includes if we organize together as a collective, but also even if we're just by ourselves, we have a lot of power and again, legal rights that we can fight to be upheld. The four things that I think is really important for people to know is that one, we have a right and power to speak out for ourselves and organize without fear of retaliation, because it's actually illegal for landlords to retaliate against renters for speaking out about their living conditions and organizing. We also have a right and power to demand that housing is up to code and that is livable. Too often, the relationship between landlords and tenants is very lopsided, but it's actually supposed to be a reciprocal relationship. And so one of the things about that is that we also have the right and power to withhold our rent if major repairs affecting the habitability of our homes are not addressed. And that's something that Rachel is going to go through more later. And the final thing to note, and this is really, really important and crucial for people to know, we have a right to a court hearing before any eviction occurs. And we actually have the power to challenge those evictions too. And there are going to be some other speakers who are going to talk about some of those strategies that we can use, like when we go to court. But it's going to be really important, especially now, for people to know that like you have a right to a court hearing before eviction. So Rachel, who's now going to talk about escrow and habitability, two things that are really important.
Thank you, Tristan. So I'm going to bounce back over to the Detroit Renter City website because it is a resource that people can look at online and on their phone. One of the things that Tristan and I haven't mentioned is that a priority of Detroit Renter City is specifically to make sure that policies that affect people are translated into actual accessible and usable documents. So I am showing you our website right now, and another resource that we have available to people for each of our website pages is a flyer of the same information. So if you're someone who has friends that don't have internet access, or if you would like to share our materials out to other tenants in your building or neighbors on your block, each of our web pages is additionally turned into a flyer, a PDF flyer that can be printed. So the escrow and withholding rent strategy is something that Detroit Renter City has taken into consideration as being a strategy specifically for renters in Detroit because of the quality of the stock of housing that many of us live in, and the absenteeism of a lot of our landlords who aren't showing up to take care of basic repairs, aren't showing up to take care of major repairs. You know, when your furnace busts out in the middle of the winter time, or if pipes burst, those are things that need to be addressed. And if they're not addressed, you actually have the right as a tenant to withhold your rent or to make the repair yourself and then deduct that from the rent that you will give to your landlord. So as you can see, just in what I'm sharing with you right now, we have information on here about what it means to withhold rent, that rent can be withheld in a bank account that you can open through your own bank, or even just use your savings or your checkings account as an account of this kind, to make sure you are putting aside rent that will later prove that you are willing and able to pay rent to your landlord, if only they would take the actions to fix major, minor, or emergency types of repairs in your unit. We then, because we're located in Detroit, have information on here about contacting the Building Safety Engineering Environment Department to make sure that when renters decide to withhold rent because of lack of repairs, that you take the additional step of reporting those repairs to the city building authority that can issue tickets and issue fines to your landlord and pressure your landlord to make those actual repairs. When you report any kind of maintenance issue to a landlord, an additional, or to a building authority, an additional step that you should take as a renter to protect yourself is make sure that any maintenance issues have been issued to your landlord in writing. You can do it in a text message, you can do it in an email, but make sure that there's some kind of way that you can indicate the date at which you reported the maintenance issue to your landlord. So we have, again, on the website, examples of times when you would want to put your rent in escrow, things like dangerous electrical wires, if your unit does not have access to hot and cold running water, or if there's a sewage issue, if your unit cannot hold heat at 68 degrees minimum temperature, or if your landlord fails to keep your unit safe and functional in general. We also have more information about the repair and deduct option. So if you think it's going to be a better option for you to fix a major issue in your rental unit than to rely on your landlord, say they're out of state or they live out of the country and it's sort of, you know, fallen on you to make the repair, make sure that you take photos, make sure that you've allowed your landlord to understand that you're going to move forward with making repairs, and always keep receipts for the materials that you end up paying for, because deducting out of your rent requires that you can show your landlord what kinds of costs you've taken on as a tenant to fix the repair that was their responsibility to fix in the first place. So I'm going to hand it over to Tristan.
Yeah, so lastly, to wrap this all up, especially in the midst of the pandemic, also because there is a moratorium on evictions throughout the state of Michigan until June 11th, it is really important that people know the steps for a legal process of eviction. All too often, we've heard stories of people being evicted in the middle of this pandemic, which is absolutely illegal. And what people have to know is that there are actual steps, at least 4 or 5 steps to the process of eviction, which we have on a PDF file on the Detroit Renter City website to go through. But know that, first off, a 7-day notice is not a notice of eviction. Again, your landlord cannot physically remove you from the property or evict you themselves. That actually is something that only the court has the power to do, and only bailiffs can physically remove you from your property. And then again, that's after a court hearing has happened, where a judge has actually entered into an eviction notice from the court. And I think these things are really important, and we try to, make them as kind of clear as possible, and so that people know the steps themselves, and that like whenever those steps like don't happen, like you have the right to call in and report. So that's when it's really important to reach out. We have on the website some legal resources for people to call, but also challenge your landlord and let them know that you have rights and that you have power, because oftentimes just the knowledge of knowing that is a great way to back them off. And so I really encourage people, especially in this time period, that's one of the best mechanisms of defense that we have right now, especially because of the moratorium on evictions till June 11th, to really fight to make sure people are in their homes. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tristan and Rachel, both from Detroit Renter City. Appreciate so much sharing that with us. Super important stuff. So to our viewers, if you have questions about what you've heard here, you can write them in the comments of the live stream. Check out the resources, including a link to that webpage that you were just looking at. It's in the caption. There's a link to all the resources that we're sharing tonight, everything that can help you get connected with other renters to organize. Also, if you haven't yet, do share this video so more renters in Michigan can learn about this and know what they need to be able to stay housed and to fight their eviction. So the third part of our teach-in tonight is, what do you need to know about your legal rights as a tenant? We have Libby Benton from the Legal Services of South Central Michigan with us to talk about that. Please introduce yourself more fully and tell us about tenants' rights.
Thanks, Amy. My name is Libby Benton. I'm an attorney at Legal Services of South Central Michigan, which is a nonprofit that provides free legal advice and representation to seniors and low-income individuals. And we cover 13 counties in South and Central Michigan, but there are excellent legal aid nonprofits across the entire state of Michigan that are available to represent seniors and low-income tenants in eviction cases at this time. And the easiest way for you to find legal assistance near you is, I'll give you the website later, but I'll link to it. It's michiganlegalhelp.org, and they have a guide to legal help where you can type in your information and find out the best resources for you. I'm going to share my screen. Today I'm going to talk about two things. Great. Sorry, great. I'm going to cover two things. The first is a really important new federal protections that cover many tenants in Michigan. And then the second is to just kind of pick off where Tristan left off and provide a few more details about your tenants' rights in Michigan's non-payment eviction process. So first, Amy talked about the current moratorium in Michigan, which lasts until June 11th. And then there is another moratorium on evictions that covers many tenants until July 25th, 2020. And that is from the Federal CARES Act. And that moratorium also prevents landlords from charging you late fees during that period, from sending you a notice or filing a case. And if you're covered by this act, then even after July 11th, your landlord, if they want to evict you for non-payment of rent, has to give you 30 days notice rather than the regular 7. So an important question that you might have is, how do I know if I'm entitled to these protections? So there are 3 big groups of tenants that are covered by the CARES Act. The first group is tenants who generally live in subsidized housing or have a voucher. And subsidized housing are things like public housing, project-based Section 8, low-income housing tax credit properties. And if you are not sure if you live in one of those properties, there's a link here to a database where you can look it up. And then another group that's covered is if you live in a building where your landlord accepts Section 8 vouchers, even if you don't have one. And sometimes it's hard for you to know this, but this is something you could ask around and see if any of your neighbors have vouchers, or ask your landlord if they accept vouchers. So the next big group of tenants that are protected by this act are tenants that live in multi-family properties, that's 5 or more units, or mobile home parks, and your landlord has a federally backed multi-family mortgage. And you're probably wondering, how in the heck would I know what type of mortgage does my landlord have? But for these multifamily, for these big apartment buildings and mobile homes, there is a link here to a database where you can look it up, and it will tell you, you'll be able to tell whether or not your landlord has one of these mortgages. So these are not subsidized units. You're paying market rent. It's privately owned buildings, but they happen to have one of these mortgages. So you'll want to look it up. So finally, there's a third group of tenants that are covered by these protections. And these are tenants that live in single family homes or smaller apartment buildings with 4 units or less, who have landlords who have a federally backed mortgage. Unfortunately, there is no easy way for you to know whether or not your landlord has one of these mortgages if you live in one of these smaller units. So what you can do is you can ask your landlord, you can send them a letter asking them to tell you whether they have one of these mortgages. And they should be able to figure it out by looking at their mortgage paperwork or using an online lookup tool. And the state of Michigan has said that before a landlord can file an eviction case against you, they have to look into this and they have to certify that they are not covered by the act. But even if your landlord does that certification, that's something that you still might want to look into and bring up with the judge if they haven't, to make sure that they're really not covered. So again, those are the groups of tenants that are covered by the act. If your landlord is still charging you late fees or threatening with you with eviction, or has filed an eviction and you think you're covered, you should try to get legal assistance, and that's the link there. To try to find assistance in your area. And then if you're not able to get assistance, this is something that you would bring up to the judge. When others have talked about how important it is to go to court. And this is one of the things that you could bring up and tell the judge and ask, either for the late fees to be thrown out or for the case to be dismissed if it's filed, before August, really. Great. So now I'm going to move on to providing a really general overview of Michigan's non-payment eviction process. And this is just to say that there are groups of tenants who have more rights, like subsidized tenants, mobile home tenants, people after foreclosure. And so, if you get to the point where you're facing eviction, reach out to other tenant organizations, visit Michigan Legal Help, try to find an attorney to really get individual advice to help with your case. But as other people have said, I think that the most important takeaway is that that initial notice that you get, the demand for possession, is not the notice to move out, and that the entire eviction process, you have rights in it, and it takes at least a month and often longer, so that please don't feel pressured to move or that you don't have a voice in the process. So I'm going to go through a little bit of each of the steps and talk about a few of your rights. So Tristan already covered this, that when you get that initial notice, this is not an eviction notice. If you don't pay or move out within 7 days, that just means your landlord can file an eviction case, can start a case. So then the next piece of paper that you're going to get from your landlord if you don't pay is a summons and complaint. And this is going to tell you the date and time and location of the first hearing in your eviction case. And there are some areas of the state where it's not going to tell you where your hearing is. Unfortunately, you have to file something in writing with the court within 5 days to even get an opportunity to go in front of the judge. And so that is in Monroe, Lenawee, Jackson, and the city of Westland, a few other places. So please be on the lookout for that. And I put a link into an online toolkit that can help you get that paperwork in so that you can get a hearing and get your day in court. And this is also a critical time when you get the summons and complaint to use that to apply to the state of Michigan for help with back rent or to local agencies. You want to apply as soon as possible, and there is assistance out there. So next, next up is the first hearing. And this, like everyone else has said, it's really critical for you to go to court if at all possible. Or if the courts are going to start having virtual hearings, participate over the phone. Because if not, your landlord wins automatically and gets a judgment for however much they tell the court that you owe them. And if you don't go, then you don't get a chance to challenge that. So at that first hearing, there's a few basic rights that you have. One is that if you haven't been able to connect with a lawyer yet, you can ask the judge to postpone your hearing, and they will usually give you at least another week, which gives you, more time in your home and more time to connect with a lawyer about your rights. You also have a right not just for a jury, but for a jury trial. And there's a $50 fee, but you can submit a waiver. And a reason that you might want a jury trial is that juries might be more likely to have been renters themselves. They also take longer to schedule, but at the same time, you would do best in front of a jury if you have a lawyer to help you with that process or contact someone for legal assistance. All right. And then another key point is at that first hearing, you'll probably be approached by your landlord or your landlord's attorney. And the judge might even tell you to go out in the hallway to talk to your landlord or your landlord's attorney, and they will ask you to likely sign a consent judgment. But the most important thing is to remember is that you don't have to sign that. You have a right to talk to the judge. All right, and then I'll just cover quickly, a few of the major defenses. One is the CARES Act that we already talked about. Two is, looking over your ledger really carefully to make sure your landlord is really charging you the correct amount. The third is excessive late fees. This really varies by court, but usually anything over $30 to $50 a month a judge would either completely eliminate the fee or reduce it to a reasonable amount, and that can really add up. And the final one is if your landlord's been failing to maintain the property, the rent that that your rent during the time that those conditions existed should be reduced. Great. And then finally, even if you go through the trial and the judge or the jury tells you that they think that you still owe your landlord some money, you have 10 days from the date of that judgment to pay that amount. And if you pay that amount, then you get to stay in your house and the landlord cannot evict you. So if you're, especially during this time when people are trying to get back to work or waiting on unemployment assistance, know that up until the very end, if that money comes through, there's an opportunity for you to stay in your home. And then, only then, after those 10 days are up, can the landlord ask the court to issue an order of eviction, which would actually allow someone to remove you from your house. So that's it from me. These are some helpful links that you can look through, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Libby. Really appreciate that. And I think, the big takeaway is it takes a lot longer to go through the eviction than people think. You have time. And you can stop share on your screen. There you go. Perfect. So yeah, people can and should use that and get support from other tenants to be able to use that all the way through, and that is their legal right to do so as a tenant. So thank you so much for talking about that. Again, viewers, you might have some questions about what you heard here. We're going to have a short Q&A at the end of this live stream. If you haven't yet, go ahead and share the video so other people can learn this information. So moving on to our fourth part and our last part before the Q&A. What experiences have folks had in actually fighting evictions? Now, we've talked about what your legal rights are. We've talked about strategies and resources and how to organize. Well, now we have some folks who have experience doing that. From Detroit Eviction Defense, we have Jerry and Gail Cullors and Bob Day here to talk. Please introduce yourselves more fully and tell us about your experience.
Hi, my name is Jerry Cullors, and I am a member of Detroit Eviction Defense since 2012. And my experience came about when my wife, my daughter, and myself were getting ready to be evicted from our home after 23 years of living here. We woke up one morning to where there was a dumpster set outside our house. We heard the noise, but we didn't know what it was until we looked out the window. And there was a dumpster sitting on the side of our house. So we like, what is this about? And after a couple of phone calls to the city, and I take that back to the Bank of America, they informed us that we were being evicted. Now, come to the process of how this happened. My wife and myself, got in touch with Bank of America before all this happened to ask for a modification on our rent, on our mortgage. Bank of America said, no problem. Okay, so we go through the process of all the information that the Bank of America wanted, and we mailed it in. They turned around and said, oh, you're missing a page. You have to send it all in again. Okay, so we go through that, put the page in that they said that we were missing, and send it back in. Again, a week later, we get another message from Bank of America. You're missing another page. Okay, so we go back through everything, put the page in that they say that was missing, and send it in again. Third time, Bank of America called back, say, you're missing another page. So we go through the process this third time, say, okay, well, so I told my wife, I said, what we're gonna do, we're gonna send this in certified because something's wrong with this. So we sent it in certified to the person that was in charge of it. And then a week or two later, we get a message from Bank of America, oh, that person no longer works here. So now you got to send the whole package back in again, the entire package. And we like, what are you talking about? We sent this in already. You have all the paperwork. Little did we know that this was a ploy of theirs, to where it would keep you from going through keeping your home. They wanted a house. They wanted us evicted. And so through the process and all that, next thing you know, we found out the reason why is because we went and got a lawyer, and the lawyer contacted Bank of America, and Bank of America didn't like that. So they sent us an eviction notice. They taped it to the door, and the next day follows the dumpster. So we didn't know what to do. We were lost and dumbfounded. How are we losing our home because we asked for a modification? So we called a couple of neighbors. Neighbors came over, and then they started calling people. We did not know that before all this happened, one of our other neighbors, Jennifer Britt, had went through the same thing. She lives around the corner from us, a few blocks down. And we drove by her house, seeing them out there, with the signs and everything. Like, well, what's all this about? We did not know that she was going through what we were about to head into. She showed up. She came over to our home, Jennifer Britt, and she started calling people. My neighbor from across the street came over. She started calling people. Next thing you know, all these people started showing up at our home. We didn't know who they were. They came, they came at the door and they told us who we were. They said, we're with Detroit Eviction Defense. I said, okay, come on in. And at that time, they came in, they asked, what happened? How did it happen? And what do you want to do? And my statement to them was like, I want to keep my house because I have no reason not to. I did not offer to give up my home. Bank of America decided they wanted my house. So we go through the processing, like we said, well, how long before they show up and everything? So like from the contest, what everybody thought, well, they'll show up in the next couple of days. Literally, we know they were showing up that same day to evict us. So we went through a long thing, about the discussing. No, we're not. Detroit Eviction Defense stood up and said, no, you're not moving these people out to their house. This is their home. And like the bailiff came in, big old tall 6-foot-something woman, and she, and the funny part about it was Trisha was there, and he said, "You're not moving them out. You're not going to do this." So the lady looked at me and said, "Well, how much of this stuff do you want or you don't want?" I said, "I want everything. I live in a home that has 3 floors and an attic and a garage. You asking me what I don't want after 23 years of living here? I want everything." So the cut is short and everything, she called her boss and said, well, people actually live here. Evidently, they was under the impression that we were squatters. After 23 years, we were squatters. So they told us, okay, well, give them till tomorrow to get their stuff together to get out. So she left. Detroit Eviction stayed and said, okay, well, we'll be back here at 6 o'clock in the morning to make sure that you're not going to be evicted from your home. Now, granted, we did not know any of these people that showed up at our home. And this is what was good about it. This is why I belong to the organization today. My daughter came up to me and said, Dad, who are these people? And why are they helping us? I said, Chantel, thank God we don't know them, because your best friends would not stand up here with you. These are total strangers, and they stand up here with us. So the next day came around, and one of the members decided to find out, well, what we could do, what can we fill the dumpster up with so they can't use it? This happened in August. And so around the community, everybody had their leaves in the bags. So we drove around the neighborhood, picked up all the bags from the whole community and filled the dumpster up with it. The bailiff shows up and she was really mad. She was really, really, really mad. So she set off for 2 more dumpsters. Now, the thing about them, they couldn't get down the street when they finally showed up because of all the cars. Because more and more people had showed up and found out what's wrong. No, you're not moving these people out. They sent 5 police cars over my house with 2 cops in each car. And a lieutenant showed up in his car. And I'm like, we couldn't get you over here if there was an armed robbery and a murder. But you showed up to put us out of our house. In the meantime, one of the members of Detroit Eviction Defense said, get in touch with Joe, and he's a lawyer for Detroit Eviction Defense, and he'll rush in a request to, for I forget what it's called. Anyway, he rushed the paperwork in downtown and everything. Then another member went down there that next day and picked up the paperwork, and they notified the police lieutenant that was there and said the people are staying. So the police lieutenant called his people off, and the bailiff was still there. And the wonderful part of it all was the fact that we are still in our home today through the fact of where our neighborhood, our neighbors, and Detroit Eviction Defense stood up for us. And I get choked up every time I talk about this. I cannot believe that total strangers stood up for us. And to this day, I am with them, and I always will be with them, because I believe in what they're doing. There's too many other people in this country that are losing their homes for no reason. No reason, all because you got some big corporation that can pressure you to lose your home. We went to court. We got ripped off by 2 lawyers in the same while we were doing this. And the second time we went to court, the second lawyer told us, well, when you go in there, tell them you don't understand what the consent form means, and the judge will cut it out, because we signed it not knowing exactly what it meant. So the judge asked, well, you know what you signed? And I said, no, I don't understand it. So throughout this whole process, Detroit Eviction Defense has come along, and we have saved over 100 and some homes here. And I just want to make sure that people stand up for yourself, because nobody else will. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that story. Bob Day, did you have anything to add while Detroit Eviction Defense has a little time left?
Yeah, just brief. Thanks to Jerry.
That's amazing.
Quite a story from those days. And I've been with Eviction Defense since 2012 also. We're in a new time period here. I'd urge people to read or look at the WXYZ report on the car caravan we did last week. We had about 55 cars demanding extend the moratorium, cancel rent, and so forth. And Ted Phillips is in that story from United Community Housing Coalition. And he says that there are 2,600 eviction judgments entered in 36 District Court in Detroit right now, just waiting for the judge to sign the eviction order. 460 some, the eviction order has already been signed. And that means the day the eviction moratorium is lifted, we've got several thousand people in Detroit facing eviction through March 13th. And the bigger change is the rest of March, April, May, when thousands of people haven't been able to pay rent because of losing their jobs, not getting through unemployment and so forth. So and that's all over the state and all over the country. So this is a level of mass evictions that we're facing that we've never seen before. I mean, I think even going back to the Great Depression, you couldn't find anything like this. So what Jerry's talking about in terms of solidarity, direct action, organizing to fight, that's what it's going to take. We're going to have to pack courtrooms. We're going to have to use every tactic we can think of, requesting attorneys, requesting jury trials, whatever, to try to stretch the process. We're going to have to organize to demand action on rent. We need rent relief, right? This is a social crisis. And so we've got to organize, all of us, broad coalitions, to demand that the government, local, state, federal, get some rent relief going so people can stay in their homes and we don't have thousands of people thrown out into the streets during this crisis. And the key to it is our own organizing, our own direct action, how much hell we can raise. And so we need to build these coalitions. We need to organize to fight. We need to unite with our neighbors and in our neighborhoods. The point Jerry made about Jennifer Britt and the fight we were doing to save her home. And that's how he and Gail got connected, because of the fight there at her house. And that happened over and over with the Detroit Eviction Defense, where you're in one struggle, and in this case, one building, and then neighbors in another building find out, and that's how the thing spreads, and that's how it grows. And that's what we're up against now. So we really got to unite our forces, be prepared for a new level of struggle, and organize to fight this thing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's exactly right. All right. Thank you so much for those stories and for giving us some concrete ideas about how it works and how we come together to do this and how it builds. It's crucial. And so we're still, oh yeah, someone's asking to where does DED meet weekly, just so viewers can know. Bob, do you want to
Yeah, we
tell
meet.
us?
We've been meeting for a few years now at 2120 Russell in Detroit.
Okay.
It's Old St. John's Church. We meet there every Thursday at 6. But during the pandemic, we've had to meet on Zoom. So you can go to Detroit Eviction Defense, our Facebook, our webpage, and also our phone number, 313-530-0216. Contact us and hook into those Thursday night meetings and discussions, and also follow our Facebook and webpage for actions that we're having and struggles that we're involved in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, great. As we've said before, a couple of things. The resources are in the document and the video caption. So you can look over all of this information and get more familiar with it. It's this video is going to be posted so you can watch it again and catch the parts that you may still be working to understand or that you didn't catch. So let's start. We have a few questions here. Ruth asks, what about people on month-to-month or whose lease is up during the moratorium? What kind of protections are available for people who are on month-to-month or if their lease is up during the moratorium? And if our panelists just want to let me know in the chat who would like to speak to that, what's available to them. All right, Libby, you can go ahead.
Yes, there is an argument if the reason that your lease isn't being renewed or the reason that you think that you're no longer being evicted or that you're being evicted is because of your inability to pay. If under the Federal CARES Act, you could make an argument that you shouldn't be evicted because it really is based on non-payment, even if it's coming across as a termination of your month-to-month lease or your or non-renewal of your lease. So that would be if you were covered by the CARES Act, being able to take advantage of those protections. Unfortunately, there are fewer protections, but they are out there. So I would direct you to michiganlegalhelp.org that can go through in more detail some of the defenses in those cases.
All right, thank you, Libby. And Rachel, if you want to speak to that too, thank you.
Yeah, so what we have found in Detroit Renter City is that whether you are on a month-to-month lease or you're someone who has not signed a lease, so if your lease agreement is verbal, you still have the right to a safe and habitable rental unit to stay in. So one of the reasons Detroit Renter City assembled the information that Tristan and I shared tonight about the habitability of your unit or putting rent aside in an escrow account and withholding it from your landlord if your landlord is not maintaining a safe and livable standard for you still applies to people who do not have a written lease and people who are on month-to-month leases. So if you're in a situation where your parts of your rental unit are not functional for you or you need major repairs, one of the things you may be able to do right now so that you can have a sort of, ace in the hole or ace in your back pocket, is to start to take note of the maintenance issues in your unit, photograph them, put in writing to your landlord what these maintenance issues are. And if you're in Detroit or other cities in Michigan, contact the local building authority and have them document that you have maintenance issues that need immediate repair. What that will do is, if it gets to the point that your landlord wants to take you to court for lack of ability to pay your rent, you will have this additional, sort of credibility. You'll have this additional sort of proof that you are a responsible tenant. You're someone that cares about your living unit, probably more than your landlord does, because they're not upholding their own responsibility to fix your unit, and that you may be willing to start paying your rent again, but your landlord also needs to hold up their end of the bargain and fix your unit to the degree that they are responsible for. So we can direct people again to the Detroit Renter City website to check out our links at the top of the page that refer to habitability, as well as escrow and when to withhold your rent. Again, it's a strategy that we want to test out and want people to push their landlords on. It's not a sure thing, but it is a strategy, and it is your landlord's responsibility to make sure that your living unit is safe, decent, and habitable.
Thank you so much for those answers. Okay, great. We'll move on to another question. Mayak in the Kalamazoo area asks, what if you live in government or HUD housing? And I think the question is, what are the protections available to you? Who would like, we covered that a little bit, but maybe we want to go a little more in depth on that. Libby, go ahead.
Yeah, so if you are in HUD housing or any kind of federally subsidized housing, which usually means that your rent is based on your income, that's usually a good way to tell that you're covered. One of the main things is that you are protected by the CARES Act until July 25th. And then the other really critical protection you have at this time is that your rent should be reduced to reflect any decrease in your income. And so you want to contact your voucher administrator or your landlord right away and keep a record of that in writing. So take a picture of what you send in, do it via email so that you have proof of the date in which you told them that you've lost your job or that your income has gone down. And so your rent should be reduced to, 0 or near 0, which is really important. And then all of the other protections apply. And your lease will have even stronger language about the need for your unit to be maintained. And it varies by program, but those are the major protections.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Libby. We have just a couple more questions if the panelists don't mind staying on. I think they're both really good questions. Emily asks, my roommate/landlord, they're the same person, evicted me due to him not feeling safe to live with anyone during this pandemic. He did not cash my April rent check, but has threatened to sue me for rent money. Should I be concerned about him taking me to court? Who would like to, you can let me know if you'd like to speak to that. Okay, Tristan, go ahead.
Well, first off, I want to say that not usually when landlords illegally evict people is a civil infraction, but because there's a state order against evictions, it's actually a criminal issue. And so what I would do is actually file a police report with the state of Michigan and also contact Attorney General Dana Nessel's office. Because actually you have the right to file suit against that roommate who's the landlord, because even though they're like you were roommates / landlord, they still have to go through the legal process to evict you. And again, they weren't supposed to, like that eviction, if it happened under the moratorium, it wasn't supposed to happen. So that I do know.
Great, thank you. And if we're good on that, then one last question from Emily. What's the minimum percentage of a given landlord or property manager's tenants that you would need on board for a rent strike to be successful and safe for folks involved? Let me know if you'd like to speak to that. Go ahead, Katrina.
We don't have like an official percentage, but we would say the majority or more than the majority, like around 60% of the tenants and the units. That's what we've kind of been going for just in our local organizing. But I don't know if others can speak to that. We were saying like the majority or more than.
Okay, great. And Rachel would also like to speak to that.
So when you are working with a large group of people who all have one common landlord, so if you're in an apartment building or a complex where you have a shared landlord, something to consider if you want to organize a rent strike is that there will be people in your building or your complex who are making a choice not to pay their rent. And there will be people who do not have that choice and are simply unable due to restricted income, they've been laid off, they have reduced hours at work. And what I would encourage people to do in situations where paying rent is not a choice and it's a hardship that people have fallen upon due to the state of the world today, is that as a group of people who may be making a choice not to pay rent, so maybe you have cash in your bank account to fall back on, or you benefit from generational wealth, or you have family support that can back you up financially, is to come up with a reliable and guaranteed safety net to ensure that people who have fallen on hard times and cannot make the choice not to pay rent are going to be supported in your effort to rent strike. Because if it does come down to your landlord taking legal action, the people who are unable to hand over rent at the point that maybe severe legal action is taken will need your help. And if the majority of people in a building decide to rent strike and they don't consider the folks who are more vulnerable in that situation, you are guiding a sinking ship. And you're also putting people who are experiencing hardship into harm's way without providing them with a life vest, without making sure that they're not going to be left behind. So if you're organizing a rent strike, make sure that you're doing that in a way that's also financially supporting and being accountable to the needs of people who don't have the ability to make the kinds of decisions you do because of the privilege that you may have.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. If you're up for it, we just got one last question, and I think it's particular to places like Grand Rapids and Detroit, where we have a lot of single family units and not necessarily big buildings. Are there tools to find other properties that are owned by the same landlord or company so you can, so those renters can start to talk to each other? And if you'd like to take that, let me know. Libby?
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. That's a challenge in the Ypsilanti area too. There's a few large companies that own a lot of single family homes and small apartment buildings. And I think that one of the most effective ways is probably on social media, posting and trying to find people who have the same a lot of times the management company will be the same, but each of the buildings, if you look them up, are owned by a different company name. So it'll usually be the address of the property LLC. And so it is hard in that way to track down who owns all of these LLCs.
Okay, thanks, Libby.
Yep.
And then Tristan, were you finished, Libby? I just want to make sure. Was that okay? Great. And then Tristan also wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, so no, I just want to speak to the challenge that is, because in Detroit, for example, we have dealt with, there is in Island View, a neighborhood on the east side, tenants association that have recently organized. And one of the things that they discovered is that their landlord slash owner of the property has several different LLCs on different names. And so sometimes it's really hard to, get that information because the speculative nature of like housing now, it just means there are all these kind of shadow LLCs jumping about. And so one of the things, this is an adequate answer, I'm sorry, but I'm thinking about ways in which we can be creative and somehow come up with like a database or like a way to share information about like what we have in terms of information and knowledge about like property owners. Like I know in Detroit, there's a website called Property Praxis that it can start, it could be a place. But I think, that's something for the statewide coalition to consider too, like how we can maybe like pull together like a list of like property owners or LLCs that we're familiar with and share that out to be a way for tenants to connect with each other that way. So.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you so much to our folks who taught us tonight for participating. To our viewers, if you came in late or if you missed anything, this live stream will be available on No Rent Michigan's Facebook page. And then in a couple of days, at least, it should be available on YouTube with captions as well, if there were any accessibility issues. Remember to check out the resources that are in the video caption and to find your local tenants union to get more support in your location. So thank you, everybody. And please, everybody, stay safe and stay in solidarity. All right.